Hello, my name is Tamsin Lockheck. I was in charge of computers for 25 years and worked my way up to lieutenant colonel. I spent most of my adult life navigating digital battles that no one ever saw. I've broken into terrorist networks, stopped foreign intelligence leaks, and testified in secret meetings in front of senators who couldn't even say half of the acronyms I used every day. All of that didn't prepare me for what it was like to be treated like a stranger while standing on the path outside the house my grandfather built. Late September. My papers for getting out of jail were still warm in my bag when I got out of the taxi. I could feel the weight of quiet on my chest. The porch light moved above me. The kind of soft glow that used to mean hello. Now it felt like surveillance. My sister Delilah answered the buzzer. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just looked down from the top of the stairs and said flatly, "I'm calling the police." At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. Then I saw the way her hand hovered over her phone, already dialing. "You can't just show up here," she snapped. "This isn't your home anymore, Tamsin. You left, you disappeared." "I just came back from service," I said. My voice caught on the last word, brittle as dry leaves. "I thought maybe I could see Mom." "She doesn't want to see you," Delilah answered, her expression hard as stone. "Neither does Dad." Then she said something that hit me harder than any military blast. "You're not in the will. You're not even on the deed." 10 minutes later, a police car pulled up. One officer was young, the other older, military buzzcut. A small hesitation in his step as he looked at me in uniform. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Lockach," he asked. "This property belongs to Delilah Thatcher and Richard Lockach," the younger officer said. "There's no record of you having legal access." I stepped back as the gate closed again. And in that moment, I realized something far colder than war had just started. I wasn't fighting enemies this time. I was fighting blood, and I would not lose. I didn't drive away that night. I parked 2 blocks down and sat in the dark, with my coat zipped to my chin. The streetlights pulling faint halos onto the sidewalk. The house, my grandfather's house, still loomed at the end of the lane, its windows glowing soft orange like nothing had changed. But everything had. The front yard, once dotted with grandma's hydrangeas, now held a single sign stuck crooked in the ground. "For sale, private offering." I stared at it until the words blurred. I hadn't cried in years. Not when I went. Not when we lost soldiers in Bahrain. Not even when I came home to an empty apartment and a military salary that felt more like a tombstone than a thank you. But that night, something cracked. The place that was meant to anchor me, where I'd climbed trees, memorized Morse code with Grandpa, and slept under a ceiling of glow-in-the-dark stars, was now being scrubbed of my existence, and no one inside seemed to care. I stayed in the car until morning. My uniform, still nicely pressed from the discharge ceremony, had creases that dug into my skin like insults. I watched lights flash on inside the house around dawn. A figure moved in the living room. I knew the stance before I saw the face. My father, still thin, still upright like he ran boardrooms in his sleep. He never once looked toward the street. I pulled out my phone. I wasn't sure what I expected. A message from Mom, maybe a breadcrumb of recognition, but there was only one unread text. No name, just return to base. "There's nothing here for you." I let the phone fall into the cup holder and stared at the dashboard until the sun edged above the roofs. I wasn't built for surrender. At 9:00 a.m., I walked into a small cafe just off Jefferson Street. Ruth Clay was already there, sitting in the back corner in a black jacket that made her look like she hadn't aged a day since undergrad. We'd shared a dorm once, a short-lived friendship interrupted by service and time zones. But when she looked up and saw me, something in her face cracked open recognition, maybe regret. She didn't ask how I'd been, just turned her tablet toward me. "Thought you might want to see this," she said. On the screen was a real estate listing, 450 Windmere Lane, my grandfather's address, listed under Ravencrest Holdings, LLC. "I didn't sign anything," I said. She nodded. "That's what I figured." She tapped again, showing a property transfer filed 3 months ago. My name Tams Enlock showed on the seller line. "That's not my signature." "No," she said quietly, "it's not, but we're going to show that." And just like that, my battle had a shape. A war not on foreign land, but buried deep in family lies, forged ink, and one stolen home. And I was ready to fight. We sat in quiet for a few minutes, the hum of the cafe soft against the clatter of coffee cups. Ruth had already pulled up half a dozen papers, property transfers, notary stamps, filing records. She moved like a lawyer who'd done this before. I, on the other hand, felt like I was learning a new language, one that used deception as punctuation. This notary, she said, tapping the corner of the screen, was suspended last year for falsifying DMV statement. Same signature shows up on your title transfer. My jaw clenched. So they didn't just steal the house. They planned this. They did more than plan it, Ruth said, flipping to another file. They moved fast, and they made it look clean. Delilah said I wasn't on the deed, that I'd been cut out of the will. Ruth looked at me carefully. Your grandfather left the house to you, didn't he? I nodded. He told me in person, said it out loud the day before he died, but I never got to see the papers. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a printed county register record. They filed a new will a month later. That one leaves everything to your father and Delilah. My stomach turned. They made the will. Could be or forced it. Either way, it's not consistent with the version I remember from years ago. We'll need to find an original. I kept copies, I muttered. Digital backups, maybe even his old video diary. Ruth's eyes lit up. If we find even one inconsistency, timestamps, handwriting, witness credentials, it's enough to open a legal claim. I leaned back in my chair. They told me to my face that I didn't matter, that the house wasn't mine. And now I find out they buried a trail of fake papers under a shell company. Ruth said Brian Calloway's name shows up on related logistics filings. My hands stiffened. Delilah's husband. Yep. Works in supply chain, right? International freight. Always moving. Never clear about where. Ruth opened her legal pad and began making notes. I'll file an order to freeze the title. We'll subpoena the notary. Pull all land records for Windermere Lane and start tracking Ravencrest's ownership tree. It was methodical. Ruth moved with the accuracy of someone who didn't flinch at power plays, and yet I couldn't help feeling like a child again, locked out of her own house, watching the adults steal Christmas. They think I won't fight back, I said. They don't know you, Ruth answered. That night I drove past the house again. The door light was off, the hydrangeas were gone. The place looked shiny and wrong-like. Someone had tried to erase the memory of a life, and missed only the ghost in the sidewalk cracks. They took my home on paper. But I had a pen too, and I was going to write myself back in. The next morning Ruth called me early. Her voice was calm, but there was strain beneath it. I pulled the energy records for the house, she said. Power spikes like industrial refrigeration. Steady load for what? I asked. That's the thing, she said. There are no permits filed, no business license, no renovations on record, but someone's definitely running equipment that shouldn't be in a private basement. The silence between us sharpened. I knew that kind of vague, shadow-strong, quiet, and always hiding in plain sight. I need to see it myself, I said. I figured you'd say that. Be careful, Tamsin. That evening I parked 2 blocks from the house again. Windows cracked just enough to feel the fall air bite my skin. I had no plan, just gut. Around 10:45 a man appeared across the street. Mid-40s, baseball cap pulled low, jacket zipped tight. He didn't look at me, just leaned casually against a lamppost. When he walked away, I noticed something stuck under my windshield wiper. A blank piece of paper, no envelope, one line, all caps. If you're really Tamsin, meet me at Alley 9, 11 p.m., come alone. I paused for less than a second. The lane behind Windermere Lane was barely lit. Chain link fences, old trash bins, and the faint smell of oil and dust. He was already waiting. Weathered face, mechanic's hands, a Marine Corps tattoo faded on his wrist. I knew your grandpa, he said before I could speak. Name's Ethan. I fix cars at McCrae down the road. I've lived here long enough to know when something ain't right. I stared at him, not trusting easily. What did you see? They say you're unstable. That you've got problems from combat. That's what your sister tells the neighborhood. I didn't flinch. Let them talk. But I've seen guys come at night. He said vans, no plates. Always black. They back into the alley, unload crates, real quiet, always the same guy watching. Real tall, wears gloves, never speaks. He paused. Your sister's husband, Brian. He's there every time. The tightness in my chest grew heavy. Did you see what they brought in? Couldn't get close, but it ain't furniture. Boxes get locked inside that basement door, and then power use jumps through the roof. I slicked a small tape recorder from my coat pocket and held it tight. I need to see it myself. That's not smart, he warned. These aren't folks who care about rules. I don't care if they care, I said. That night I dressed in black, clipped a camera to my collar, and returned to the alley alone. I stayed low, using the half-burned fence for cover. At 12:03 a.m., I heard the first low-engine growl. 2 black trucks rolled in. Lights off. 4 men climbed out. One of them was Brian. He moved with confidence, gesturing toward the back door like he owned it. I recorded everything. Their moves, their faces, the timestamps. Then Brian stepped into the building, and I followed. I couldn't get close enough to see inside, but I found a vent with a clear noise path. I slipped the recording inside and waited. Voices filtered through the metal. The officer finds out. No sign. Sever the tie. I stopped breathing. That sound, I knew it. Southern rhythm, gravel-lined, slow and deliberate. My father, he wasn't just involved. He was leading it. I backed away, hand shaking around the recorder. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I did what I'd been trained to do. I documented. I cataloged. I vanished into the shadows because now I had proof. And the war had a voice, his. By morning the recording was gone. I had returned to the alley just after sunrise, trying to retrieve it before anyone noticed. But the vent was cleano device. No sign I had ever been there. That told me 2 things. They knew I was watching, and they were watching back. An hour later, I got the message. No name, no welcome. You're playing with fire. I have your service psych file. Want to see what it says about you? I stared at the screen, breath frozen, heart pounding. Whoever sent it had access to restricted files, and they wanted me rattled. But they underestimated what kind of soldier I was. I didn't delete the message. I forwarded it to Ido Ruth and to Isaac Ng, a cybersecurity expert I'd served with during a joint task force in Ramstein. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, but he answered in 6 minutes. Pull everything. Start making the chain. Don't wait. That night, my apartment turned into a war room. I started up 2 laptops, a backup server, and 3 encrypted drives. The documents I'd saved over the years, copies of emails, scans of property files, encrypted call logs, were no longer sentimental scraps. They were ammo. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Kayla, a digital forensics expert Ruth had on standby, joined our secret Zoom call. No face, sound modulated. She specialized in scrubbing the lies others left behind. I got your data packet, she said. Nice crypto. Let's see what the lies missed. She dug into IP logs, metadata chains, financial timestamps. Isaac tracked shell company transactions. Within hours, they had a map, Ravencrest, Brian's logistics company, Delilah's personal account, and a series of midnight wire transfers that stank of laundering. Then Isaac froze. Wait, this signature on the rental contract? It's your father's. He approved warehouse storage under Ravencrest. I leaned back. The air sucked from the room. He hadn't just known. He signed off on all of it. I'm filing an order, Ruth said. Forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit government contract abuse. We go to court now. I stared at the screen where my father's name sat under the words, Land Use Supervisor. They stole my house. Now I would take back the ground they stood on, one paper at a time. 2 days later, we walked straight through the front gates. No more circling the block. No more hiding in shadows. Ruth and I pulled into the driveway of the house my grandfather left me. The house they'd stolen with forged signatures and foreign money. The Lexus was there. So was Brian's black F-150. A beautiful morning for truth. I wore my outfit. Not because I needed to, because they needed to see it. Ruth straightened her jacket and gave me the envelope. You ready? I've been ready since the day they called me a stranger. I rang the doorbell. Delilah answered, face newly painted, a performance smile already in place, until she saw me. Her lips twitched. Then she saw Ruth and the envelope. The color drained from her face. We're here to serve you with a court injunction, Ruth said calmly, placing the papers into Delilah's hand. Effective immediately. All property transfers, leases, and financial movements tied to this address are frozen. The county land office is aware. Delilah stared at the envelope like it might bite her. You can't do this. Brian stepped into the hallway. His tone was slow, oily. You really want to go down this road, Tamsin? I met his eyes. I was trained to walk roads like this. I know how to navigate darkness. He smirked. You don't know who you're fighting. I do, I said. A logistics fraudster, a forged deed accomplice, and a coward who used my name to win federal contracts. His jaw tightened. You're unstable. I've been evaluated. You'll see the results entered into evidence. Ruth stepped in. And if you speak another word of intimidation, we'll file for witness harassment. Delilah clutched the envelope like a drowning woman clinging to plastic. No, I said it was mine before you rewrote history. We turned and walked back to the car. The door slammed behind us hard and hollow. In the passenger seat, Ruth exhaled. They'll hit back. I looked straight ahead. They already did. Now it's our turn. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation of land, of truth, of a name they tried to erase. The courtroom was quiet. No drama, no shouting, just the steady pulse of federal process. I sat behind the witness table, in uniform, back straight, ribbons sharp, eyes calm. When the prosecutor asked me to explain what happened, I didn't waver. They forged my signature on a deed transferring my grandfather's house, I said. They created false financial trails, funneled government funds through shell accounts, and used my military clearance codes to access contracts they were never qualified to touch. Delilah stared at her hands. My father, Richard, stared past me like if he didn't look directly at me, none of this would stick. But it did. The judge reviewed each piece of evidence. The signature inconsistencies, the IP logs, the wire transfers, the notary suspension, the recorded AIM father's voice, gravel-lined and unmistakable. If the officer finds out, sever the tie. Then came the question that mattered. In your opinion, Colonel Lockhack, the prosecutor asked, was this a deliberate conspiracy? Yes, I said. They didn't just try to erase my name. They used it, and they built an empire on silence. The court ruled Delilah, 6 years, Brianite, Richard Lockett, years, no parole, no reaction, no shouting, just a pause. And then the sound of futures collapsing under weight. They thought no one would ever lift. I didn't speak to them, but I saw them, the veterans. Some in faded jackets, some leaning on canes, some nodding quietly as I passed. One reached out, his hands steady. Colonel Lockhack, he said. You reminded them we still stand. I nodded. We don't stay erased. Weeks later, I visited the Defense Service Library. It smelled of polished stone and quiet memory. On the Wall of Honor, carved into black granite, was my name. Colonel Tamsin Locke, Cyber Command, 1998, 2023. No one could take that from me. Not my father, not Delilah, not anyone who tried to make me forget what I stood for. I stood for truth, not vengeance. I walked out of the courtroom, not with their house, not with their money, but with my name, my honor, and the kind of justice that doesn't come with noise. It comes with clarity. And in that silence, I stood unshaken.